A full-on session, please. Time to meet our next presenter. We'll be facilitating through until our lunch break. Now, Dylan Fitzner from Healthy Business. Dylan is an experienced leader in workplace wellbeing and is the CEO of Healthy Business, which is a Tasmanian company that's been operating for 25 years. It's now part of the St Luke's family. Healthy Business is dedicated to supporting organisations to implement programs that enhance both employee wellbeing and organisational performance at the same time. Dylan's experience in elite sport, exercise, physiology and workplace health coaching places him in a very unique position to guide workplace health leadership. Titled Leading by Example, Cultivating Mentally Healthy Workplaces Through Leadership Behaviours. Would you please make welcome Dylan Fitzner.
I should have asked how to use the device before getting up here. Thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, as spoken about, my name's Dylan from Healthy Business, and actually 12 years today is, thanks colleagues for recognising that. I've been working for Healthy Business as of today, 12 years, so I'll expect a gift in the post, I suppose. So today what we're talking about, does this button here move ahead? How do I do that? Just press, or do I let you know when to go? Button? Beautiful. Running smoothly. Strategically, what I've done here is I've put up a photo of myself as well. So looking at this this picture here, this picture was taken in November last year, or October last year, give or take, as I headed into, well, pardon the pun, headed into the role of CEO. Geez, I look good in that photo. I've done a lot of work today to sort of prep myself up to look as best as I can. However, there's a bit of stuff missing on the top, which may or may not be related to taking on the role of CEO in October last year. So maybe a little bit naive to the pressures going into the role. So, look, to be honest, I turned 40 last month or a couple of months ago as well. So really, my hair was already falling out. The curse of a middle-aged man, I suppose. It was going, but the point sort of still remains. And it turns out when you don't walk the walk on wellbeing, when you skip rest, avoid reflection, fail to set boundaries, your team doesn't feel supported. They take notes and they follow your lead. So I thought it was a pretty important little quote. I won't read it out on the board, but it's just that sense of, you know, they're not listening to what you say, they're following what you do. And that's the space that, again, if you're the bloke who's taken the role as CEO and your hair starts falling out rapidly and you're looking like you're deteriorating, what sort of example is that setting for your team if you can't look after yourself properly? And the impact that can have on a team as well. So that's where this presentation today is focusing, is on the importance of wellbeing leadership essentially, and the ripple effect that can have within an organisation, both in the positive and the negative. But we'll try and focus on those positive impacts as well. So before we get into that, what we need to do is sort of set the scene a little bit, and that is to sort of look at where we've gotten to and how we've gotten there. So the landscape of work has fundamentally shifted, and as leadership needs to evolve with it. So we've lived through the Great Resignation. We've seen quiet quitting, workforce that's simply no longer willing to tolerate environments that take more than they give. And people are saying enough, and they mean it. Now, while we're quick to call out the burnout among frontline workers, the fact of the matter is that we're seeing in the studies that we'll reflect on a little bit down the line here as well, is a sharp decline in manager wellbeing. We're seeing more manager burnout, more absenteeism, more turnover, and that has ripple effects within organisations, because it turns out, and probably a lot of us in this room fall into this category, that we are managers, and when we're not feeling well, it matters a lot. In fact, 70% of a team's engagement is attributed to their manager. So when managers are burnt out, teams feel it, culture shifts, performance dips, and in turn, people leave, which obviously has detrimental impacts all across the business. Now we've got the legal. It's more than a moral imperative, right? So we all here today, we just heard Georgie speak a moment ago, obviously referencing psychosocial hazards all throughout her presentation. You'll catch a theme of that, obviously, in these types of forums across the time that you're spending chatting with people. So it's clearer than ever. It's not just the moral responsibility of a workplace. It's under the WHS law, and organisations must manage that psychological risk. So this means that the pressure is no longer just on the worker. You know, we've done those in the past. You know, let's do a resilience program. Let's help the worker become more resilient. Well, that's fine, obviously, but it's also the pressure is on the system, and leadership is at the centre of it. So I should have also mentioned that we're doing this presentation as well on Thursday, so you guys are getting the trial run of my presentation. So by Lonnie, absolutely killing it, working out the kinks. So what we're going to do here is we've just obviously got a clear screen, but we've got some psychosocial hazards, which I referred to a moment ago as well. So we are not just responsible for preventing harm anymore. We are the biggest variables. When I say we're talking about leaders. And so our leadership must evolve, and because it's not just about our policies and processes, it's about us. It's about our emotional state, our self-awareness, our capacity to create safety through how we show up. Our communication and emotional state and the way we set expectations, support our teams can either reduce psychosocial risk or create it. When leaders fail to address these risks, they become a contributing factor to stress, disengagement and psychological harm. So when you are tired, running to the ground, stressed, your ability to stay connected, present, supported will be impacted. As well as your ability to communicate, you may find it you're in the reactionary space as opposed to being sort of more thoughtful in your way in which you're approaching things. So if this is the way that you are operating under chronic stress, you may unknowingly be eroding team trust, right? You're creating emotional hazards, psychosocial hazards in the process. So just as an example, I'm going to use an example, probably a personal example first, and then sort of more of a workplace example. So thinking back to the way that we may react to situations. I've got two girls, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I play basketball typically on a Saturday morning, right? So I didn't probably reflect on this prior to COVID coming around. I didn't realise how important that outlet was for me within my own life, right? So let's say it's a typical Saturday morning. I rock up at 7 a.m. I get to yell at people that maybe not deserve it, but hey, it's my outlet. I get to yell, jump up and down, scream, carry on like a lunatic as a 40-year-old bloke trying to get that thing inside the hoop. And by the time I rock into the house on a Saturday morning, I've got that juice in me. You know, I've already had that opportunity to socially connect, emotionally connect with other people, but also look after myself and doing something for myself. If the ball goes in the hoop, which I'd love it to do more often, trust me, that makes it funner. But the fun, my wife sometimes says, when I get home, how was it? Sometimes I will say, I was horrendous today, but I had fun because I got to yell at other people. Whereas I don't get that opportunity to have that outlet potentially on a Saturday morning, by, 3 p.m. After we've had lunch already on a Sunday, and my daughter says to me, I'm hungry. My response might be a little bit difficult or different to the way I would be if I had that outlet, right? So when I've got that outlet, I may respond a little bit more, okay, I hear you. Look, we've just had lunch. We're going to wait to dinner. There might be a calmer response as opposed to, you just bloody ate. Wait a minute, okay? Because you know how that goes, some parents in the room. I was probably that kid a lot of the time when I was super hungry. So that's just an example of that playing out, right, in my home life. And that's just a microcosm, a small example. So just that in a home environment. Now, think about that potentially in a work environment too. We've partnered, we work hard, don't downplay it. We work hard to support lots of organisations across Australia, and in some of those work environments, when I used to be working as a health coach, a lot of people would come in with stories to me. So one of the stories that came into me was a disengaged team, essentially, and a worker as a part of that team, and they shared with me a story. So he'd said to me, look, I went to my manager, and I said to my manager, I need to go to the hospital. My child's sick, so I need to take the rest of the day off. And the manager said, absolutely, not a problem. Take your laptop with you, though, because there's work still due. And that was a real story that happened in a workplace. So it's easy for us to say, what a terrible manager, What a horrible example of being a manager. But then what about, let's put ourselves in the shoes of that manager too. Where are they at mentally? Where are they at physically? Have they been looking after themselves in a way that's allowed them to respond to that scenario the way that it may have been better handled? For instance, you might say something like, great, go to the hospital, look after you, that's the most important thing in the world, get there, we'll worry about work, we'll sort that out later. But that person, under the duress they may have been feeling, wasn't able to be in that space for that worker. So that's just a good example, I guess, of when you're not looking after yourself, there's less of a chance you're going to be being able to manage the psychosocial risks within your team. And we've heard about them all throughout this conference as the ones on the board. Like how well are you going to be able to deliver feedback if you're not in a place to really want to deliver that feedback, okay? Or well enough to deal with a worker who comes in and says to you something about their work demands when you're feeling like your work demands are too high. So it's just an example I thought would be interesting to share in this context. So I'm not sure if anybody has seen Parks and Recreation before, but if you haven't, this is our mate Ron Swanson. So let's talk about how managers are really feeling. So this is some of the data. We all love data. So I've borrowed a line from Ron here to say that people say it's lonely at the top, but I sure like the view now. I think that's funny. But in some cases, it's true. Leadership can come with perks and perspective. But when we look at the latest results from the Gallup Global Workplace Report, it's far from rosy, right? So half the managers are feeling stressed most of the day, many experiencing anger, sadness, and even loneliness. 41% are either watching or actively looking. Many leaders, it's looking pretty bleak. So why does this matter? Well, because leader, as like I said before, wellbeing ripples outward, right? Disengaged, emotionally strained managers can't show up fully to support their people. And that impacts team trust, culture, performance across the board. So if we want healthy teams, what do we need? Say it out loud, no, don't have to. We need healthy leaders, not just professionally, but emotionally too, okay? So going down the data route a little bit further, we've got some little activities down the track here, which I'm sure will be more entertaining than this. But we did a really big case study with a large Australian organisation, Healthy Business. So they've got about 4,000 employees. So we got about 25% of their workforce to participate in a survey exploring the 4 pillars of health. So mental health, physical health, lifestyle, sleep and fatigue. And the data that we uncovered was significant, particularly around mental health and its impact on the workforce outcomes. So, for example, there was a clear correlation between mental health of employees and the intent for them to leave the organisation within the next 12 months. So if employees weren't in a good headspace, they're looking for the exit pretty quickly, regardless of where that stress is coming from. This reinforces the importance of early identification and support. That's something that managers and supervisors are in a unique position to do. We also saw strong links between mental wellbeing and absenteeism, which obviously is not hard to believe, which again suggests that managers who are engaged with their teams and equipped to have supportive conversations can play that preventative role in that process. So notably, employees with high concern scores were up to 6.8 times more likely to consider leaving, and this was a significant risk factor, but also a huge opportunity when frontline leaders can spot signs and connect to staff with the right support, connect the staff to the right support. That's a great opportunity to reduce that churn, improve engagement, and protect productivity. So while the data gives us a big picture view, it's local leadership, it's the managers, supervisors who are the most influential levers that can influence change on the ground. One other piece of the data as well, I won't again read through it all, but what stands out is the measurable impact of both organisational and supervisor support on mental wellbeing. So we saw a 24% increase or improvement in mental wellbeing scores when employees felt supported by their broader organisation, but just as important, 11% improvement was linked directly to support from their manager and immediate supervisor. That 11% isn't just a number, it's a reminder that the day-to-day interactions between supervisors and employees has a real measurable impact on employee wellbeing. So when employees feel backed by their manager, when they feel that their wellbeing is genuinely cared about. Not only are they more mentally well, they're also less likely to consider leaving, more likely to show up and be engaged overall. Interestingly, 92% of respondents said they feel safe speaking up. Only 52% said their supervisor supports them to live a healthy life. So clear opportunity for here where the leaders can step up and close that gap. It's not about being a wellbeing expert by any stretch. It's about being a wellbeing enabler. The best leaders make it easy for people to access support. They role model healthy behaviours and they actively encourage balance. So we're going to start to look a little bit at the neuroscience to this. So when we look at some of these emotions that managers are experiencing, one has to ask, what are the ripple effects within team environments? Neuroscience tells us that leaders set the emotional tone in the workplace. The human brain is wired to detect threat. So when the leader is stressed, dysregulated, similar to like I might be on a Saturday afternoon, reactive, unsupportive, unpredictable, they're a micromanager, it can activate a stress response within their team members. This includes that withdrawal or silence that you might find within teams. Heightened stress or anxiety, self-censorship, reduced creativity, reduced psychological safety, decreased trust and productivity. And this is often subconscious, but the impact is clearly measurable. So on the flip side, when the leader is able to connect, show up in a way that's calm, regulated, present, trustworthy, supportive and predictable, it can activate a reward state in the brain. And this state in the brain is better able to learn and process information and engage in critical thinking and problem solving. So what we've done is we've pulled together a little game show that hasn't been ripped off at all from Family Feud. We're calling it Workstation Family Feud. So we've asked our team within teams, what are some of the, what does it look like when a leader is looking after themselves? So think about the leader that's not just surviving but actively thriving, and what behaviours or habits they show. Let's chuck some hands up. You might need to start clicking some buttons over there. I didn't realise this might need some mouse clicking. This is just a well-oiled machine going on up here. So what we've got is, chuck your hand up if you can think of any leadership behaviours that you've seen in leaders or you're currently seeing in leaders that is suggesting they're thriving, doing well. Yes. Engagement, so the engagement of the staff. Now let's look on our survey. The survey says, it's not really on there, but let's just say number 8. Click number 8 for me, see what we've got there. Disconnects when's needed. No, that's not it, but good one. All right, over there. Yes, empathy. Again, not on the list, but no, number 4, I would say may relate to that. So has open conversations about mental health and healthy habits, so able to have that conversation with somebody. Any others? You've gone well so far. This could be 3 for 3. Oh my goodness, that actually is on the list. So takes regular breaks. Now it's really hard to do that. I mean, from a visible standpoint, when a lot of us are working remotely as well. We're not out there watching people to see if everybody's taking breaks, but that break can come in all different formats. For instance, if I'm in a meeting or I'm hosting a meeting or I'm part of a meeting, often I just want to disconnect immediately after that meeting and just spend 5 minutes to debrief mentally, maybe write some notes, but just not go straight into the next task. Now, is that me sitting down and having a healthy meal and having my lunch break? No, but it's just a time of reflection and ability to disconnect for a few more minutes before I'm moving into my next task. So that's a great one, whoever said that over there. All right, we've got a few more. Any other hands, potentially? Yes. Right, let's have a look. What does the survey say? Maybe not. Let's open number 5, which is in that box. And no, number 6. Number 6, there you go. There's a couple in there. Invest in personal development, whether that be socially or in the home life, but also, is doing things to actively improve themselves as a leader, and is also looking after themselves and actively exercising. Or it doesn't have to be getting into yoga pants and stretching and whatnot, but it can be, you can tell that this person is taking care of themselves. All right, we've got 3 to go. By lining, I told you this would be great. Yes? Say it again? Happy environment. Right. What could be that? We've got leftover, we've got stays calm under pressure. This is what the survey says. I'm not saying it, right? We've got number 2, we've got sets boundaries, which I think was a little bit related to yours over here too. And the last one on the list, does anyone have a crack at it? As a leader, you never see this as a leader, and I think I might need this from my team right now. Get me off the stage. Feedback is a good one. Yep. Positive. At Healthy Business, we always say feedback is feedback, so it doesn't matter which way it angles, but that's a good one. But ask for help when needed. Simone, do you want to come up? All right, so that worked well. All right, so thank you very much for engaging in that one. Promise there's not much longer to go in terms of the drier stuff. So next slide, please. All right, that's me up to do that. So, actually, we've gone to, how do I go back one? That's the one. So, if you are in a leadership role, your stress just doesn't stay in your head, right? So it spills out into your environment. This means that increased tension or miscommunication across teams, poor engagement and personal conflict, higher risk of burnout, yours and others. So if you've missed the warning signs of psychosocial hazards, then leaders start to feel, when leaders start to feel under pressure, unsupported, it ripples through the team and the system like we've spoken about. We see that drops in performance and effectiveness, efficiency, output, and in our engagement. And it can all suffer. The whole system starts to suffer. So your ability to regulate yourself is essentially a core risk control within the psychosocial hazards that we're talking about. So leaders under pressure often deprioritise their own wellbeing, right? But this has the organisational consequences. Without the self-regulation and support, leaders become contributors to the very psychosocial hazards that they are responsible for managing. So supporting leadership wellbeing is a strategic priority, and it should be within an organisation. What are we doing for our leaders to make sure that we are supporting them to be that leader? And it makes sure that we are providing the safe systems of work. We're managing workload of our leaders, but also the team's clarity and emotional demands, and equipping leaders with the tools to regulate themselves so they can respond and not react. So again, going back to the Gallup report and some of this data, less than half the world's managers say that they've received manager training, which is a massive hazard itself. We see that in workplaces all over the place where people are promoted into roles without really being provided with that management training. So investing in management training pays dividends, and teaching a manager coaching techniques can boost performance. We've seen 20 to 30% improvements in performance when we go about that. So with training, improvements to manager thriving, which ripples across the organisation, and we see that obviously in the productivity, engagement, outcomes, etc. So we're going to move along to our next piece of activity. So we've got, if you haven't got a pen and paper with you, please yell out. We've got our team with some notepads that can pass it around. But what we're looking for is reflective leaders, right? So to stay centred and support others, leaders must practice turning into themselves and ask some questions. So we're going to do some of that today. Now, the very first thing you might do when you're getting asked these questions, or you're asking yourself these questions, is you may not know the answers to these questions. Don't worry, but that's a really good start, right? If this is the first time you've ever reflected on the way that your body's coping or feeling, this is a practice that we can start to get into the habit of. So the very first question I want you to ask yourself is, how do I know when I'm stressed? So with your pad and paper, please jot this down. So obviously write the question first so you don't just return back to that note at another time and say, what was that about? How do I know when I'm stressed? So how does that manifest? How does it look? How does it feel? All those things. So I'm going to give you another 10 seconds. Right. Very, very similar to that question, but slightly adjusted, is where do I feel it in my body? So it could be you start getting stomach cramps or a headache, sore shoulders. We hear it manifesting in all different ways, right? So where does it impact you on your body? So these are all what we call little body data that we can constantly be reflecting on, feeling, being conscious of, so it doesn't get to the end of the road and we start crashing out. All right, next question. How does it affect my behaviour, tone or decision making? Think about that again in the workplace sense. Think about it in the home sense, like I've shared my experience prior. But yeah, how does it start impacting you? And now turn that lens around a little bit. So the question for the next one is, how might that impact my team's sense of safety and clarity? And when you're dysregulated, I've obviously covered off a little bit of that today, but your personal view of when you're a bit out of whack, how does your team start reacting around you or the people around you? Like I said, reflection can sometimes take time. You may not have thought through this before. May not have enough time right now to do this, but this might be an activity that you might take away with you as a leader. I think it's a really important strategy to take on. Now, the last one is, well, given all that, like, what is it for you? What do I need to regulate and reset? It could be little things. It could be the big things, but it's going to be different for everybody. And that, some of you might be writing some of this stuff down for the first time, like I said, or reflecting on it for the first time and going, oh, wow, that is the way I reset myself or regulate myself. I didn't realise I was in that habit or doing that. Obviously, there's positive ways we can look to regulate and reset ourselves, and there's more not so positive ways too, depending on the situation. So where we're going to move into is sort of the way in which we can deregulate or deal with our own stress is going to be different for everybody. So I'll quickly use another example from one of my coaching experiences over the years. Is I had one person come in and I asked them these types of questions. What is the way that you are dealing with the stress that you're feeling, or how do you get time out? And they said to me what they like to do, not like Batman over here rocking horse in the backyard, great, good on him, but this person was just as strange maybe, was they like to sit in their bird cage at home and read a book as their birds floated around them. For someone that's not a huge fan of birds, I just thought that was outrageous behaviour, but for that person, that was their thing. Right? That's what calmed them down. So it's just an example of it is different for everybody. It doesn't have to be cookie cutter. It can be little bits and pieces here and there, or it can be like old mate Batman here. So the moral of the story is, in this circumstance as well, is if we don't prioritise this, and we've all seen it, right? We've all seen it in different environments we've worked in. It can come at you and it can get big on you pretty quickly at the wrong time. Right, so you can be smashing, and I've got a colleague here today, I'm not pointing at you, but you could be smashing 8 coffees a day to get through. You could be using all other mechanisms to sort of cope, and you're shoving that thing down. And I don't know if you've all seen the video, I didn't put this meme in there, but of that goat who just tilts over all of a sudden in mid-run. I think it's actually the type, not to stress, but that's sometimes the way it manifests with people, where they're just going 100%, 100 miles an hour, and all of a sudden, bang, they've hit that wall, and they're in that burnout zone. So we do really need to think about things more along the way. So first thing we need to do is, we need to prioritise our own well-being. This is not selfish. Right, so again, the oxygen mask for a leader goes on first. We hear that on the plane, and you start to think to yourself, why would I do that? I'll protect my kids first. But if you're not around, you're useless, right? So as a leader, you need to be able to show up. So it's not selfish, it's protective. Learn to spot your own triggers. So we need to know what throws you off centre, have strategies to ground yourself before reacting. Model those boundaries. Someone had that before. Maybe the survey should have done that. So if you never log off, if you skip breaks or you push through overload, guess what? Your team's going to do the same thing as well. Access support early, right? So whether it's supervision, coaching, peer networks, EAP, don't wait for the crisis to catch up to you. Get ahead of it, right? Look, we've got EAP within our organisation, and we work with so many organisations that have EAP, which is obviously seen as a mechanism there for once somebody is in crisis. And I guess a lot of us are leaders in this space where you just implore people to use it before they get to that part, right? So whatever that might look like to you, rather than waiting for it, like put some protective measures in place to begin with. Even if you're feeling a little bit off, you're doing that reflective activity and that's changing for you week on week. Look, what can you do? You can start to access support early. Get trained and stay curious. So curiosity is calming. It's the reactivity that triggers threat. So when in doubt, slow down, ask questions is a really good method as well as a leader that we can do in this space. So the one thing that we always like to do with the presentations that we have at Healthy Business, and no matter what we do, is we always want to leave people with, well, what will it be that you do, right? So if you can leave this presentation and have one takeaway from this presentation that can support you going forward, well then we've done something, right? So again, to recap, the most effective, trusted and resilient leaders today are the ones that don't just power through. They're the ones who understand that emotional regulation and investing in your own well-being is a leadership skill. And looking after yourself is essential to leading others safely. So leadership well-being is no longer optional. It's a foundational layer of psychological safety, compliance and care. Thank you. Has anyone got any questions? You don't have to grab. No questions from the audience. I can shuffle on. I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Dylan Fitzer. Please show your appreciation.